Welcome, everyone. We are here again with Tom Christopher for our daily podcast. Tom, thank you so much for being here.
A pleasure. Thank you, Laura, for having me again.
All right, so let's just jump right into it. This week's topic is HR life after COVID-19. HR Iceberg, dead ahead. Now, can you explain that a little further, Tom?
Yeah, so we touched on this in our last call, but we are continuing to hear a growing beating of the drum in this topic. We're doing a survey once a week nationwide of several thousand HR leaders, and this week's question was, is your organization planning for life after COVID-19 from an HR perspective? And 67% of the respondents said yes, they are. The balance said obviously they're not. But when you stop and think about what's going on, we've got almost 10 million people that have been laid off and or sent home as measured by filing for unemployment, so I'm sure there's even more than that. We have $2.2 trillion invested through the stimulus package for people to make their car payments and house payments. Again, industry averages in a traditional layoff scenario is an 8 to 11% non-return rate. But the data that we're seeing through our surveys as well as through other publications is we may be as high as close to 20% of the employees that get laid off do not come back to their original employer. So they'll either trade employers or they go completely into a different industry vertical, or in some cases they make life-changing decisions, i.e. go back to school or stay home with children. But the data that we're starting to see through our own surveys is that number could be as high as 20% do not return to their original employer. So this is creating a lot of concern about workforce planning post the epidemic, whether that be in May or June. Logically, there'll be a ramp-up period of reemployment, but at some point, if this goes the way everyone expects, the economy turns back on, full employment again is reached, and then people are scrambling to fill their open jobs. It's got a lot of people very, very nervous.
Mm-hmm. And what industries are you hearing are the most vulnerable to this?
Yeah, so it's any industries that carry a fairly large non-exempt labor pool. So if you think about retail, if you think about motel, hotel, certainly the restaurant industry, and healthcare is popping for similar but different reasons. And that's both non-exempt as well as technical professionals. That this has put a lot of strain on a lot of people on the healthcare delivery side, and there was also quite a bit of risk. And so we have our healthcare clients are looking at this saying, we are busy, and our people are, in it to win it. But once this is over, they're going to need some time off, and or they may start reevaluating things saying, hey, that was really stressful, and or I took a lot of risk. Do I want to stay in this hospital, in this healthcare delivery system, in this particular city, particularly if they're staring at another breakout this fall? So again, all of this is pointing to what is life after COVID-19 from an HR perspective. There is no playbook on this thing. There is no how-to manual. And so, again, we're hearing and we're trying to share and disseminate what many, many, many of our clients and senior HR executives are starting to think about and plan with their executive business teams.
Mm-hmm. So what can companies do to avoid this so-called iceberg?
The number one thing that we're hearing is communication. And we're hearing it two-dimensionally. HR executives realizing that as they've sent workers home, and you've got a distributed workforce truly in the sense that the communication channels between those workers and their bosses, or those workers and their colleagues, or those workers and the HR department is key. To keep them feel connected, part of something bigger, know what's coming. Because in the absence of communication, as one HR executive said, people will fill the void with speculation. And the speculation is oftentimes far larger and far more negative than the reality. Whether it's, is our business going to survive? What's this going to mean? Will I have a job when this is all over with? Are we going into a global depression, et cetera? So communication is the key. Another piece of that communication is How are you feeling as an employee? How's your family? How are you faring at home? So it's that whole high touch piece. One HR executive I spoke with this week said it best: your employment brand will be defined in these worst of times, not in the best of times. So the very proactive HR leaders we're talking with are really taking a very humanistic outreach to their employee base to say, we care about you, we care about your families. Is there something we can do to help you? Know that your company is behind you. And so I think from an employer relations perspective, it's a tremendous opportunity, and we're certainly starting to see companies take advantage of that. And finally, there's the communication of life after, and it's two-way. It's communicating to your employees, we are planning for the future. We are preparing for the future. We are here to not just survive, but we want to thrive. And we want you to know that we're looking past the horizon. Equally, we want to hear from you. How are you feeling? How are you feeling about the company? How are you feeling about the business model? How do you feel about your role? How do you feel about returning to work? And trying to use that communication channels to get as much information flowing in both directions to generate tremendous employee goodwill, to get a clear sense and temperature of your employees and how they're feeling, to clearly articulate the vision of what happens after this pandemic, and then finally, to get critical data so you can affect accurate workforce planning models. This is where HR can be a true leadership function. I listened to a CHRO last Friday. He said, you know, this isn't affecting our machinery. This isn't a supply chain issue. This is human capital. This entire pandemic is about human capital. Human resources should be at the front of this pandemic, should be at the front of this business challenge, and can provide tremendous value to their business colleagues and partners around how the human capital is feeling, how it's thinking, how to best connect, communicate in both directions, and ultimately affect good workforce planning models. Critical time for great HR leadership.
Definitely. So with all that being said, what is TCG doing to help our clients?
Again, we're getting more and more cries, for lack of better words, for interim HR leaders and freelance consultants. A lot of departments are short-staffed, also because of the logistical challenges of having people work remotely, and critical projects staying on track and on schedule. Clients are asking for interim HR executives, particularly in the areas of compensation, benefits, HRIS, management and leadership development, and of course generalists. And they're looking for this additional resources in a couple of ways. One is just to have additional arms and legs to help them. Second, to help them think through things like, what is COVID-19 after this? Third, we're seeing a growing outcry for leaders who can help companies think about working remotely. And I think this is a key. And quite frankly, I didn't think about it. It didn't cross my mind. But I was having a conference call with two HR executives out of a very large, well-run organization, and they said, you know, Tom, we don't see, even though we flicked a switch to shut this thing off, we can see a phase back up. And there's still going to be a fair number of employees that are going to have to work remotely for a lot of different reasons. And so the question is, how do we do that? How do we affect a remote work setting when we have some people coming back and some people staying remotely? How do we manage that communication? How do we facilitate understanding? How do we optimize team performance when parts of your team may be coming together and other parts are still working remotely? And so again, there is this outcrying for HR executives with significant organizational design, development, and org effectiveness experience that can come in, help executives think through that, and develop very tangible and immediate plans to be ready. So when the switch comes, the notification comes from our political leaders saying, hey, it's time to send America back to work, they're ready. So again, interim HR leaders, freelance consultants, we literally have thousands of them standing by to be deployed, and we are deploying them. And the effectiveness that we're getting from our clients in terms of feedback is just over the top. So excited to support any organization that might need additional assistance.